Welcome to the Creativity series on Psychology Inside Out podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by MJ Dorian, a multidisciplinary artist and the creator of Creative Codex, a story-driven podcast exploring the inner lives of history's most influential creative minds. We talk about what creativity actually is, how ideas emerge, and why creative work often takes on a life of its own once we begin. MJ shares how he chooses the figures he covers, from Van Gogh and Frida Kahlo to Carl Jung and Kurt Cobain, and what these lives reveal about imagination, craft, and meaning. We also explore creative rituals, free play, creative blocks, and how art can return during times of grief and chaos. Finally, we touch on AI and creativity, the ethical questions it raises, and the reality creators are now navigating. This episode is also available in video format, and we hope you enjoy this wide-ranging conversation. And definitely check out the Creative Codex podcast. So, MJ, thank you very much for coming to the show. And I can say that I've been absolutely binge listening to Creative Codex these past weeks, the storytelling, the sound, the depth, and real immersive experience. And it's truly, truly incredible. I definitely recommend to everyone to listen to a podcast. We will put it obviously in the show notes. And you've been creating this podcast for over 6 years now. Can you share where did the original idea and inspiration come from?
Sure. Well, first, thank you very much for having me on, for inviting me. I've been really enjoying your show and really love the approach that you guys take to investigating the many the folds and the rabbit holes of the brain. So appreciate that. Thank you. Right. So Creative Codex, I would say that if I trace it back to something that would have been like an original seed for this idea that eventually, germinated and sprouted into this show that I do, it was probably from when I was a teenager and I was first picking up the guitar and becoming obsessed with music. And then I became obsessed with these roughly three people that became my creative idols, which were Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, and Salvador Dali. And each of them very much like did something to me in a very distinct way where I was marveling at what they were able to achieve in their respective field and genre. And it both confused and amazed me that, somebody could reach a point in their development and in their skill and in their craft and in their creativity where they can basically reinvent a complete medium, turn a world on its head, and within sometimes a very short span of time, like 27 years in the case of Kurt and Hendrix, and in that short span of time, like just changed the world, and that like I marveled at that. So when I finished college and I was pursuing a career in film and creating film music, after a certain period of time, which we can talk about, but long story short, I felt, okay, I have this inclination to really like dig into this topic of creative geniuses, which I've been always passionate about. And so let's do it. Let's see what can come of it.
Yeah. I also, because I listened to your podcast and you mentioned a couple of times that before that you also experienced, like you did some projects, right? And you basically finished one project and started the podcast, or how exactly? Do you remember the moment that you decided, okay, let's switch to this? How did it happen for you? Or was
Sure.
it
I mean,
gradual over time? Yeah.
I've always been kind of propelled to pursue all-encompassing projects, like these very ambitious feats that you end up having to, wake up thinking about, you work on all day, and then you go to sleep, with a smile on your face, knowing you did good work, and then you're still thinking about what's the next thing to do in this project. I assume it's very similar to the experience you've probably had of, writing a thesis paper or a long dissertation. And I've always felt that I feed off of that kind of dedication that it takes to climb to a certain summit with a creative work. And so, yeah, that very much informs the show and how I approach creativity.
Yeah. And after studying all these creative people and exploring creativity so deeply, how would you define art and creativity?
Oh boy, I hope we I hope you weren't going to ask that question. So
It's
that
very
that
tough, I know.
basically that will basically you know, cause us to go into a wild tangent that could potentially be the entire rest of this episode and multiple episodes to follow. Um, as you
Maybe you can.
probably expect, which is maybe why you asked it. So, I mean, we would have to tackle them one at a time. I would say, you know, this idea of what is creativity, um, there's no easy answer to what is creativity. If I was going to give a more technical definition, if I was writing, you know, an essay about it, I would say something along the lines of that creativity is when the imagination is used with a directed focus and intent, which coordinates these disparate skills and knowledge that you have toward one aim. And so this is my technical definition. But what's interesting is that I don't think you can be creative without imagination first. So I think the more mysterious question is what is imagination? And we use this term. And when you think of like a creative problem-solving task, if someone doesn't have imagination, they're only relying on their knowledge already of that field, of that task. So if they don't already have the knowledge of experience with the task, then they can't figure it out if they don't use their imagination. So I think that's the kind of mystery ingredient in the formula. And you can see people who are artists trying to address this in various ways, and also kind of spiritual traditions acknowledging this strange thing that is imagination. The Sufi mystics say that imagination is actually one of the aspects of our soul itself, and that when we die, it's one of the few aspects of our personality that actually survives death. And so already there's this kind of ancient respect for this mysterious process. And then there's artists like William Blake, who go so far as to say that, it's one of my favorite quotes from him, that the eternal body of man is the imagination. That is God himself, the divine body. So that's kind of my roundabout way of answering this wonderfully infinite rabbit hole.
And the art, and then also curiosity. You also cover it in one of your podcasts. Again, you talk about creativity, obviously about curiosity, about art, and maybe if you can, like, again, just cover a little bit the artsy part. How would you define
Hmm.
art? Because again, you are an expert in this field because you teach art, you you explore so many parts of it, and I think you also, how you say it, you can also talk from the experience and from people you cover.
Right, I hear you. Okay, yeah, we could try it. So, I mean, I think part of what makes me unique compared to maybe other people who are considered researchers in this kind of field is that I'm very much dedicated to living like a fully creative life. If I wasn't doing the podcast, if I wasn't doing this research, I would be over here at the piano writing music. And I just was working on something before we started the episode. And so, because of that, I have a very steady and everyday experience of creativity, and also the ability to observe somebody as like a little, you know, research experiment. I'm observing myself at all times, and taking notes of what processes I'm seeing happening. So in terms of, let's say, what is art, I, in this technical way, I see it as art is this natural byproduct of like a highly formed intelligence, which is, you know, us as humans, attempting to understand the infinite nuance of our lived experiences. So, you know, this is a very heady kind of definition, but in its most basic sense is that, you know, our wiring is so complex and often self-referential. And in the process, there's this overwhelming amount of information constantly around us. You know, so we're always filtering things out. And to understand the most, let's say, the significant aspects of what we're experiencing, whether those are emotional, or those are, you know, chapters of our life, whether those are traumas, whether those are just something in the environment that grabs our attention. I think to understand those things, we create art, and we need art for that reason. And when you're watching a really good TV show, when you're reading a really good book, and a narrative resonates with you, if you dig deep enough, investigating why, you realize it's resonating with something that means something to you, that's happened to you, that again, it's serving a purpose and helping you understand some of those lived experiences. So there, whew. All right, another big
Oh,
big question answered. Thank you. Whew.
I'm sorry for pushing you. And I know
No,
it's a
please,
rabbit
please,
hole, rabbit
let's
hole. I
do
know,
it.
I know.
Yes.
We definitely will put just, you also can answer it. I think every time you can also answer it slightly different, right?
Yeah,
To these questions. It's also a little bit about how you feel at this moment, and maybe just just something that there was a spark that you could answer it in different way because you feel it right now like this, because it also resonates with you slightly different today. Yeah,
right, right.
so
Well, it's a problematic question, like to not to play semantics, but the idea of first what is art, because the word itself doesn't. I feel like it doesn't capture enough of what the experience of art is versus what the product of art is versus what the process of creating art is. And so we have a lot of deficiencies in our language regarding that. So, there's, and I made an essay in an episode about this. It's a short
yes,
one. It's titled Language Fails Us. And so the idea being that, when we say what is art, a part of why you can get several definitions from the same person at different times or different people is that there's the experience of art. There's, being in a museum and looking at a painting or statue or what have you. But then, oddly enough, you can also have the art experience by viewing something that wasn't created by a person and isn't traditionally seen as art. One time I was walking up my porch steps and it was a snowy day and the snow had just blanketed the ground. And I looked over and it was completely quiet and silent on the street. And there was a bright red cardinal that had just kind of landed on this untouched snow. And I was like stunned for a moment and in awe. And this was a moment of art. I'm sure you've had those kinds of experiences yourself.
exactly, in awe. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah. So what do we say to that? Does it still fit under the umbrella of art? Should there be a new term? It's tricky.
yeah, well, definitely, definitely. Maybe going back a little bit and maybe easier questions. Going
No,
back a
please.
little bit
I'm all for the challenge. Thank
to
you.
your podcast. So I'm really curious because you covered so many people and very diverse people. You covered Nikola Tesla, Salvador Dali, the Kurt Cobain series, Marina Abramovich, and so on. And just curious how you actually decide which figures and topics to cover, and how they resonate with you personally, and how you decide and think, okay, this is it. I will cover this story right now.
Right. So, I mean, what drives me in any of these episodes and series that I do, um, one is the recognition that I'm going to be spending a lot of time with this person because I really want to get to know, the ins and outs of both their work, but also their life story, their character, the strengths and weaknesses of their personality to help understand their story in kind of in a humanist way. And be, partially because of that, all this time that I'm spending, I want to make sure that it's fruitful. And so there needs to be something compelling there for me. There has to be a thread that can tie everything together. And oftentimes, this is either a thematic thread that I want to be exploring at that time. For example, in the Frida Kahlo episode, that would be this idea that pain becomes art. You can transform painful experiences, emotional, physical, existential, into an externalized piece of art, and that there's a sublimation there that's involved. And so that theme is, I think, it's just really, really dense and a nice thing to explore. And then the other thread that I'm often looking for is something in their life story that is captivating. And in a sense, all of these art greats one of the reasons I think why their stories survive and their art survives for us is because oftentimes there is something very compelling in their story. Whether it's Frida Kahlo, who, experienced when she was in her late teens a very dramatic, horrifying
Accident.
accident that left her almost paralyzed for months. And then she survived that, and then she's seen as this figure of surviving over great circumstances. Or you could look at somebody like Vincent Van Gogh and his story of, being entirely destitute, only being surviving by the support of his loving brother, and then being able to paint 900 paintings in the span of 10 years. And then, of course, that ends in tragedy, like some of these stories do. But again, that does make for a good story, that makes for something that we want to think about and reflect upon over the generations. So I think those two are what I'm looking for.
Hmm. And also, as I was listening, for instance, for Van Gogh series, it's 4 episodes, and I think you mentioned at the beginning you was planning 2 or 3, right? And then
Mm.
it evolved into 4. So just curious how you like when you structure and everything, you go with the flow and it evolves, or you kind of upfront know most of the time what you will cover.
Right. I mean, as a creative myself, when I'm working on something, whether it's a painting, a piece of music, or in this case, an episode or a series, I have my intention in mind, and so I start with that. But at the same time, I'm leaving room for this piece, this creative work, uh, to resist or push back in its own way. Because oftentimes we start to see when you're creating something, I'm sure you've again experienced this in your own life, creating things or essays or any other tasks you've had that are creative. If you're paying attention, the piece itself has a life of its own. At least it seems to have that effect. Whether that's just your unconscious saying, no, no, you should go this direction, or whether it's something else going on. Either way, as an artist, you don't analyze it too much. You just know that it's pushing back a little bit. It's saying that this should be a pink color rather than an orange color. It's saying that this story is not actually about what you thought it was. It's actually about, surviving through struggles of life. So oftentimes, halfway through an episode, I realize I'm going somewhere in a wrong direction, and the episode actually wants to take it this way, that this is actually the theme. And then I'm like, damn it.
Does it
Okay,
happen often? Just curious, does it happen often, or like every time, or sometimes?
probably every other time,
Mhm.
every second time. But then though, when you catch that kind of wave, then you're really going like then you're off to the races. You're on the surfboard riding a tsunami, and you really notice the energy change, the shift, because everything starts to like fit into place now. And
Yeah.
yeah. There's definitely an energy to it. Um, so I'm not sure if that answered the question, but yeah,
Yes, yes,
those
yes.
go
And
like that.
if again, like diving into this a little bit, was the particular story that maybe was hard for you? Maybe you started it and then you needed to drop it for a while, or basically, yeah, like was there particular episode, if you can disclose it, or everything was again in the flow and you were able to like again finish it?
Yeah, there definitely were a few where they went in a slightly different direction. I'm trying to recall which ones those were. It may come to me in a little bit, but
Okay, yeah.
yeah, it may come to me in a little bit. I know there was one that, yeah, I was like halfway done with the episode before realizing the theme is actually something completely different. Um, Maybe we'll try to come back to that one. Sorry.
Yeah, we can come back to it, no problem, of course. Yeah, yeah. So maybe let's talk a little bit about your creative process again. And you work across several mediums: music, visual art, writing, podcasting. What else? Maybe I forgot and didn't know. So how do these creative processes overlap, and where do you feel they completely distinct? So how they overlap and how they're completely distinct, do you think, in your
Sure.
experience?
Yeah, this is also really interesting to reflect on. I haven't really thought about it in this way before, but I would like to first comment on this idea that maybe from somebody who's not used to experiencing, creativity on a daily basis, and the kind of bolts of inspiration and whatnot. if you hear that somebody works in multiple mediums, maybe there's the impression that when you receive like an inspiring idea, that you then have some choice in directing which medium you're going to do it in. Let's say, if you um, see a visual of something or you experience something, and then you're like, well, I feel like poetry today, and I'm going to do it in poetry. But in my experience, the way I've seen it working is that the inspiration itself comes packaged with the medium it wants to be in. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't write poetry often, as an example. A few times a year, a phrase will just I'll be walking the dog, and then a phrase will just hit me in the back of the head like someone just threw a baseball, and I'll be like, "Whoa, okay, that's really interesting." There's a lot of you know potential there. Like for example, once this phrase came to my mind, "Joy is for young lovers. I crave the storm." And I was like, "Ooh, this has this. It feels like it's telling a story. Has a lot of context in it." And then, I developed that into a poem after a few days. But it came packaged as this is a poem. This is what it's meant to be. And this phrase can't be a painting, even though it might be interesting to challenge yourself and try to do it that way. And so that's one aspect. But then to address this other idea of where do they maybe overlap and how are they distinct, I think I've noticed that the different mediums, whether I'm writing, doing music, poetry, or visual art, what they share is there's overlaps in the skill sets you use for the different mediums. And sometimes it's surprising because you wouldn't think that the skill set in one medium applies to another one. But I think that's where the overlaps are happening. So as an example, for my undergrad, I studied music composition at the Conservatory of Music in Brooklyn College. For my graduate degree, I studied music composition for film at NYU. And so I have a very music-oriented mind and view of the world, and thinking of when I'm working on a piece, in this case of music, I have an allotted time period, and how do I place, sounds within, 3 minutes, within 40 minutes, you approach it differently. So you're thinking compositionally. So when I'm doing writing, like on the show, when I'm writing an episode, I notice that the skill set of a composer comes into play because I'm also dealing with a certain length of time, roughly, that I'm trying to fit something within. But instead of thinking in terms of musical notes, I'm still thinking structurally, but now it's about words, it's about narrative, it's about the flow of ideas, when things are going to come back again thematically in a similar way, the way if you're writing an extended piece, the theme would return again. And so that skill set of thinking compositionally is applying also. And I think that happens with all of the mediums in a way when you work with things like when you're working with poetry. I like to say the words and the phrases out loud because there's a musicality to them.
Yeah.
And so right, so I'm again using my skill set for rhythm and the feel of words the way they would be if you were singing them in a sense. I don't know if your experience is similar, or if you've seen something else like this.
Yeah. So I'm like very audio and visually. I don't know. I just feel things, and sometimes I want to. I make a picture. Like I quite often actually make a picture, and sometimes I just use audio notes, and then I write it because quite often that happens to me when I'm running, for instance. So
Mm,
like I cannot just write, and yeah, so that's very handy right now to have this technology with you all the
yeah.
time. But then yeah, something. So, but I think you also mentioned quite often during your podcast that it's sometimes it's so futile that that you have it and then in 1 second it's gone. So you need to
Mm.
capture the moment, otherwise you will forget. You will think that, oh, this is something very good, like some good. I remember it so many times, like especially for the poetry, I sometimes have this in my mind and like, and but then if you don't put like if you don't record it or you don't put the notes, yeah, it's gone. It's
No, yeah, it's amazing how easily you can convince yourself. to think like, this is such a great idea.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm gonna forget this after I wake up from my nap. No, forget it.
Yes, yes, yes. So same, same. Actually, it's good that you also mentioned this in your podcast that I'm making like this dream journal and so on. So many times also happened to me like, oh, this is such a great idea. I definitely will remember it. Of course not.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's
no.
crazy. It's
Yeah, yeah,
crazy.
no.
I don't know what it is. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's a reason for it, but yeah. So I use my voice memo app on my phone all the time for that reason. I scribble something down in a notebook. I between lessons when I'm teaching guitar, there's like maybe a 5 minute break, and I'll have an idea, and I know my next lesson's about to start. I'm like, let me just record this idea. I'll come back to it later, and that helps a lot because, yeah. Otherwise, I've had the experience of noodling and trying to figure out what was the exact rhythm, or where was that note. What were these two notes doing? And it just you've lost the magic. There's some kind
Mhm.
of neural path that that was traveled that now forget it. You're lost in like a city of different alleys and streets. Hard to find that place again.
Yeah, I sometimes think about it like, this concept of outside consciousness. It's like you also mentioned it, right? There is so much information going on, and sometimes you kind of tune into I don't know, some kind of this outside consciousness, some kind of
Yeah.
this creative part, and then it drops to you. And if you like didn't catch it at the moment, it's gone. Basically, the wave went somewhere
Yeah.
else, and you,
It's true.
yes. So
Has
I
that
kind of have
effect?
this parallel in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why, in ancient traditions, you see reverence paid to the muses because there's this implication and there's a recognition that the creativity, the inspiration doesn't always feel like it's coming from you. And that's a strange phenomenon for us to get our heads around. Um, but it's much easier if you're an artist to just accept that that's the way it is and don't question it too much and just appreciate that it's happening.
Yeah. At the same time, of course, as you know it yourself, you need to have the craft, right? So you need
Yeah.
to have the medium to express
Yes,
yourself
yes, yes,
because
yes, yes, yes.
I mean, yeah, of course, everyone can at least maybe write or like make a photo, which is kind of easier right now, but still, you need to. I remember, I don't remember which actually photographer was it, but when there was an exhibition back in Moscow a long, long time ago, and they asked him, oh, like, how you create these photos, and he said like, yeah,
Mm.
you take like thousands of them and then one's good. So that really like sticks to me with me. So
Yeah.
that's, yeah, that's how you do it. Yeah, you just really try a lot as well.
Yeah, and,
Uh,
and I think that this idea of the craft that you bring up, and since we're on the subject of inspiration at the moment, um, I think the craft, when you develop your ability in a craft, whether it's writing or any of these visual or audio crafts, it's the craft that makes up for the holes in your inspiration. So you, of course, ideally get some kind of bolt in the beginning that really propels you and stuff, but um, it's hard to keep that going because it is very much like this frequency thing that it feels that way. And so at the end of the day, you still need to get the work done. And
yeah,
so you practice your craft and you hope to achieve some kind of mastery because it helps you understand what those inspirations are trying to do, what they're trying to capture. If you received the image of a scene, with human figures, in battle or one of these Renaissance scenarios, it's your ability that you've practiced over years in capturing the human form that will allow you to then translate that into a visual work, into a painting. So yeah, the craft I think fills in the holes of the inspiration.
yeah. Going into your creative process, can you also maybe walk us how your creative process look like from idea to finished episode or piece of art? Anything that you can take as example and make it a little bit tangible for us.
Yeah, yeah, sure. It's tricky comparing the episodes as a work of art to like maybe a piece of music that I'm doing. The process is very different. I mean, with an episode, it takes an exhaustive amount of research and reading, and I very rarely do that on the digital form. I like to get physical books and destroy them with pens and highlighters so that I think it's a process of me internalizing the material better at the physicality of it, and then also uh, referencing it after the fact. When I'm doing an episode, I'll be able to more quickly find what I highlighted, put a star next to different symbols and whatnot. So that element of it, I think, slows down this interpretation of what the creative process is looking like. But I would say that, if we're talking about something like a piece of music, that there's a more there's a purer structure to the process. So I started this piano piece the other day, yesterday, and I had a very rare few hours free where I didn't have any obligations. And so I spoiled myself and let myself sit at the piano. This wasn't the intention. I had a few things on the to-do list, but I was like, you know what? This piece sounds really, really good, and it's hitting me emotionally, so let me work on it. So describing, let's say, like the shape of that one, because now it's almost at its finished stages. It started in that case. I hadn't been on the piano like creatively for a month or two actually. I was practicing, but I wasn't being creative with it. And so I sit down and oddly enough, I had this thread of an idea that my brain was like, there was an intuition, do the back and forth on the D and the F. And
Mm-hmm.
like I felt the fingers in my brain doing this back and forth on the notes D and F. And I was like, okay, it sounds like I guess I should start with that and see where it goes. And that idea alone isn't interesting enough for a full piece of music. But I think what your mind is doing there is it's giving you a little entry into the rest of the piece, into the rest of the artwork, into the explosion of neural pathways that are about to happen. And then you can handle it as you will after. But yeah, so I started with the D and the F back and forth, and then there was like a little rhythm that I like to do with an upbeat with the F on its way back, and then that kind of I added a left hand little line, and then after this tiny section of that, it just morphed into something else while still staying in the same key. And so I was like, okay, I like where this is going, um, and I started working on it, and then I probably worked on it for a few hours. Um, And so initially, I would say there's this kind of thread, and you're following it, and that leads to an explorative stage. And then in there, you're getting the sense of your terrain, basically. And this is for music, the terrain of the ideas that you're going to be playing with. Mm, in that piece specifically, there was a point where there's improvisation involved, and the improvisation it's not just to create ideas. I feel like there's a discovery aspect of it. So you're improvising because part of it is you're discovering like the layers of it, under the surface, because oftentimes there's something already that wants to be spoken, similar to like if you're writing a poem and you know that the phrase is wrong for some reason, or you know that this rhyme isn't the right rhyme. So you're kind of uncovering things as you go. And then there was a point in time where I knew one of the sections needed to change to another section. So that requires where the craft comes in a little bit, because maybe the inspiration isn't as pure at the moment. And so now it's kind of about idea generation. And so you're developing something and using, one of the tricks, as in this case, as a composer, that you can go to, the four chord of that key, G minor, and then you can develop things to contrast. And then there's the process where I start to write it all down in traditional notation, because for me, it tends to solidify the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also, I think it also forces me to make like firm decisions when I'm writing it down in notation, because now it's like, okay, now it's going to be on the page. Before it was in my fingertips, it was in the air, and it could still kind of disappear if I just walk away from it. But now I'm putting it on the page, so I'm making those final conclusive decisions to solidify it. And I feel it's very satisfying to then see it in front of me on the page.
Mm-hmm. So
And
you don't
yeah,
even record it during the process? You don't put like recorder on just in case or not?
I do. There's some things that are like a phrasing idea that I do have to record that before it slips away, because I might be realizing two ideas at the same time. Like there might be this idea I kind of improvised. And I'm like, wait, that's going to be really good. But I don't want to forget this one that I'm currently on. So I was like, hold
Yeah.
on, I'll come back to you in a little bit and I'll record that. And then I continue working on this section. And then once it's written down and I feel like, okay, it's 90% there, I can, if I have to leave now, tomorrow, I can let the craft fill in the gaps and kind of wrap up the piece. But also by later that night and then this morning, as I was coming back to it, I noticed like, okay, I can alter this melody a little bit. Maybe there's like a little ornament I can add over here now that I know how the full scope of the piece looks. And so there's those little final alterations that are happening, editing, you could say, uh, that aren't anything major. It's more like a finishing touches. And then the piece is big. I'd say it's probably 99% done now. Yeah.
So how do you know that this is it, that this is like final piece? How for you, you decide, okay, this is like, you're satisfied with this, or it's never happened?
It has to pass, the quality test. So when I'm playing it, does it feel good? And when I record myself playing it and listen back, do the ideas sound good? Like, am I enjoying it listening back? That's really the quality test. If something doesn't stick out to me, which is, I guess you're relying again on the experience of your craft, your instincts, and in a sense, the relating it to, comparing it to that initial thread of inspiration, I guess that caused it.
And then in the process, do you follow certain rituals or structure or anything intuitive during creating? Do you have like this flow? Maybe you have like suggestions for other people also that.
I always jump 3 times and spin 5. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
And smoke a cigarette. I mean, imagine that. I mean, I don't smoke anymore, but I could completely understand how smoking a cigarette and doing creative work, like that's a very powerful ritual. Because yeah, you get the rush of the nicotine, which again it kind of grounds you and focuses your mind. You have the ritualistic aspect of the cigarette and the fire, and just sitting at whether it's at a typewriter or a piano or painting. So that's really interesting. But yeah, I don't smoke anymore. I do enjoy, drinking tea. I light a candle sometimes. Often lately, if I'm doing something at the piano, I light some incense that I like. And that puts me in a good headspace. So it's simple things, simple things.
And do you have like, yeah, so like you don't have sparks of creativity, something like triggers, no, like a mood, a place that you know that whenever you go, for instance, if you're dry on creative process, do you maybe go for a walk or I don't know, to gallery or something? Do you do something like this, or it's never happened to you? Just you always in the creative process. I don't know.
I mean, that's the interesting thing about, having your hand in different mediums is that when one is a little dry, then the other one is wet. And in the process of you working in this one, it gives you a little bit of a break and a little time for an idea to come up in the other one. So that might be why I ended up, putting my hand in so many mediums because uh, whatever is happening in my brain, I'm getting some kind of pleasure from the creative act, like enough so that I can sacrifice things for it. And that's, part of the life of a creative. You end up sacrificing a lot, but in the pursuit of your, craft and the mastery of your craft. But yeah, in terms of where I can still get inspiration, maybe there are some dry spells sometimes. Travel does it, just whether it's to a park that I've never been to, a nice long walk, feeding my head really good quality stuff, like good evocative film, a TV series that I would really enjoy, or a novel. In that way, it activates my emotions. Once my emotions are activated, I find that the ideas start to flow. It kind of greases the wheels. And free play. And in that regard, that's like the thing I was describing when I sat down at the piano and, I closed the door so that nobody hears me bearing my soul. But part of it is that you're going to be messing about a little bit, whether it's you're taking a brush and trying a whole bunch of new paint on the canvas, with the potential that it's going to fail. Uh, but there's free play involved.
And about free play, so just curious, did it came to you naturally? You always were like, I know, like allowing yourself to free play in different medias, or you kind of just noticed, okay, this is when I'm doing this, it's actually like really helping me. So how did it come to you? Like just naturally or gradually that you
Yeah,
noticed?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think I was fortunate enough that as a child, when I was doing creative works, um, I really enjoyed them. And so mm, I didn't experience any discouragement from like when my parents noticed that, I enjoyed drawing. Eventually, when it was time to choose a high school, uh, they they had the foresight of mind to be like, okay, well, he clearly has an interest in art. There's this art high school if you want to go there. And I was like, yeah, yeah, totally, let's do that. And so I think it honestly just comes from having not discouraged it, and that explorative curiosity that is naturally part of your childhood, I think continues.
Mhm. And you mentioned that your parents were very supportive. Were there also some mentors, like who were maybe played a crucial role, or you would say that just the whole journey that parents were supportive, and or did you met some interesting people really inspiring, and you then, or maybe it was Kurt Cobain again. Maybe it was just mentors that you never met as well.
Yeah, I mean that's the interesting thing about having creative idols. It's a really positive thing because when you become close enough with their work, you read their biography and with a sense of their spirit, they can become kind of like imaginary friends to you. And I think this is kind of people still experience this these days, even if they're not being creative, they're just, really enjoying a certain artist. And then, that's kind of where the awe comes from when you potentially meet them in real life. And you feel already close to them is because all the time you've spent with them. So it's a real effect. And so, aside from the creative idols, when I got into high school, I didn't have really any immediate models for music or for dedicated creative work around me, like in my family or immediate friends circle or anything. So when I was, yes,
So, if I may ask, then none of your parents or relatives had this expressive creative outcome, like outlets. No, like no one
no, my
draw.
brother was a decent illustrator, but then he kind of, that ended up falling by the wayside. He ended up kind of falling down darker paths of like substance abuse at the time and everything. So he ended up being a poor role model for me, for those developmental teenage years. So and that ended up being completely my own thing. Yeah, no family
Sorry to
models.
hear that, and thank you for sharing.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
no worries. Thank you. He's still alive and he's doing relatively okay now, so we can talk about it. Um, But yeah, so then when I was in high school, there was a teacher who was an older man named Mr. Brown, and he recognized that I was a decent oil painter. And so he would say, why don't you stay after school? You could use the room. And he hung out as well, and he would give me pointers about things, and that was a wonderful feeling to have a validation from somebody that was experienced in the craft, and this feeling of like, being acknowledged, being seen. Um, so that was a figure that I would put under that kind of column.
Mhm. And we also spoke a little bit offline just before the podcast that you also have two kids, right?
Yeah,
And are they creative, and if and how you support them in their creative process? If you try to also like develop something in them, or yeah, what is your approach?
sure. I mean, I'd also love to hear your experience as a parent as well. So, my daughter, she definitely has a talent for visual art and also like spatial intelligence stuff, like sculpture and creating like puppet masks and things like this. She's 10 years old. And so I would say art is probably her favorite subject in school. And so as she was approaching, the year that she would be changing to middle school, um, we looked at the options potentially for like an art-based middle school, and we did find one. And so that's where she goes now. And so I feel like that is, even though it's difficult to get her there, it's a little far. It's turning out to be definitely the right decision. And then with my younger guy, who's 2 years old, uh, he isn't doing much visually, but he loves drumming and loves
Uh-huh.
music and loves picking up like a toy guitar and rocking out to like AC/DC on the speaker. And
Mm-hmm.
it's super cute. And the second that I started to notice it, I was like, oh, okay. Like I see, like he was drumming on stuff. I see that when a video came up, on YouTube about like a drummer talking about his different drums and the drum set, and I was like, he seems really engaged by this. I wonder if this is just like a fad, and then it's been like 6 months now, and he has his own little drum set, and he hits it every
Mm-hmm.
day, and he's able to keep a steady beat, and I just adore watching it. It's so I don't do anything directed with it. I'll sometimes play along with him, but more I just provide him with more experiences and more tools so that he can, for now, just kind of enjoy it himself.
You basically expose them, right? So as I understand it, you expose them to different outlets and see what sticks and what they kind of deviate to, right? You see.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure, how you've noticed this too, that um there's a tendency in like someone's biology toward a certain act, toward a certain experience. And for whatever reason, it's like, well, my son loves banging on things, but he also knows how to keep a steady beat. And so it's okay. You recognize that. And if you can discourage it, surely. But I think it's a much more positive experience for everybody if you encourage it.
Oh, definitely. I think discouraging it's should be forbidden to do with kids, honestly, because you can kill this any threat of creativity or
Mm.
just also self-expression very easily. So yeah, I try not to do it with with my kids. Definitely not. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, yeah, I see, but behind you, there's a beautiful wall of art. I'm assuming
yeah.
one of your kids is responsible for this.
Yeah, not for everything, but yeah, some of it. It's mostly my daughter, and yeah, she likes to draw. So honestly, she's
Cool.
just there is expression in Dutch on her drawing. So basically on her tekening, she's like drawing all the time.
Oh,
She's going to school, she's drawing there, but also coming and back, and she just draws. And yeah, we
amazing.
right now put her also to drawing class. So since 4, because here in the Netherlands, yeah, only like things start to be kind of for kids available from 4 years of age, because this is when they start following things.
Hmm.
They can follow alone, and because in our family, no one kind of. We mostly like we're doing sports, so we're expressing
Oh,
ourselves
really?
through sport.
Hmm.
That's why actually I kind of go from the different direction, but at the same time I think it's important to also like notice, yeah, where kids incline to. And I'm not sure, but I think you also mentioned it with your daughter, that there was a part when she was like singing, and when she was younger. So I'm not sure if you were exploring also this part for her, like dancing, singing, music, what's like other outlets, or it's kind of stopped naturally with her. You mentioned
Yeah, I
one of the
mean,
podcasts, yeah.
yeah, yeah. She definitely showed, an interest in playing around by ear on the piano, and she's still to this day. Don't tell her I know this, but she'll turn on, the songs in her room and sing along and dance in there, and I know it's happening because I hear it. But I used to do the same exact thing when I was preteen and a teenager. Um, again, credit to my parents for not telling me to shut up because I'd be like straining and trying to sing, like Soundgarden songs and stuff, and Kurt Cobain. But yeah, so there's those elements to it. Now, I wanted to say about the art, the visual art. Um, Maybe you've already experienced this, but of course, the support of this talent, this hobby for the child is paramount. But then eventually comes the difficult moment where you realize I don't have any more space to keep all these beautiful little artworks, and I can't throw them away.
Yeah.
I can't just like put them in recycling. So it's like I don't know if you've come to that moment yet.
Yeah. But that's why the wall started, because like I couldn't put it in some kind of space, and you have a choice: either you start throwing it away, or maybe you put something on a wall, and then it's, how you say it, it's kind of processed and changing. So over time we put something down and put something on. And but the thing is, when we actually started to put it, we first started with the fridge. I can be honest that we first just put few
Classic.
of her drawings here on the fridge, and she just was so happy about that. So I thought,
Uh,
okay, I mean, and with the wall, you can always just put everything down and like refurbish it and
sure.
yeah, repaint. So it's, and but to give her this kind of happy moment, yeah, and it's also very, I know it's very positive right now. Also, it's not only
Sure.
one wall right now; it's also a couple of walls.
Cool.
Yeah. So, but yeah, why not to give it to kids? It's honestly, it's cost you nothing.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's amazing. I love that. I love that.
okay, going back to you, and because you are a creative person here, and maybe going back to blocks, and do you have some blocks that interrupt your creative process, and how do you move through this?
So you mean if like
So
you create a
something
flow or a
like,
writer's block or something?
yeah. So, for instance, I can tell you that for some people, I don't want to put it in your mouth, but for some people, it can be stress. Quite often, people, when they're stressed,
Mm,
they like, yeah, then cannot produce anything creative. But on the other hand, for some people, actually having deadlines and be under stress, it actually helps. Do you have also something
sure.
like that that actually blocks you
Yeah, I
creatively?
mean, I personally love deadlines, and there's a way to to view deadlines in terms of lighting a fire under you is this idea that you treat the deadline as like if you cross this point and you don't have this work done, you're dead. It's like you better be done by this point. So I set personal deadlines. I sometimes have to be, life is life. I will adjust them occasionally to be realistic because I'm over ambitious in that regard. But in terms of blockages, I think the a steady frequency of being creative, week to week, in a weird way, it prevents blockages because again, there's this idea that the gears are turning, they're greased and ready to roll. And there's something to that. There's something to be said for that, that if things are already in motion, it's much more easy to keep them in motion
Mm-hmm.
creatively, even if it's just hopping from one medium to another and then coming back. Um, so there's that, but of course, being human, that there are moments where things feel like something is stopped up. Yeah, stress, but I did notice once when a very close friend of mine, one of my best friends, passed away, and this was about 5 years ago now. I noticed that for about 2 months, I couldn't do anything creatively. It just didn't work. I didn't feel the need for it either. But also, it just felt like there was too much chaos in my inner world, and everything was upside down emotionally, existentially in a way too. And I that startled me because having been an artist all my life, I'd never experienced something like that before. And so I can understand how for some people, whether it's depression, whether it's a trauma in life or just a tumultuous period, can can turn something in you upside down enough where something like art that you might rely on otherwise suddenly doesn't feel like you can do it. It's very strange. But but I can say that after about 2 months, I felt like I needed to express something from that experience. And from there came a painting that I worked on. It was a watercolor painting that in some way helped me to contextualize and kind of focus some of this energy and thoughts that I was having. And so it became kind of a meditative work in a way where, while working on it, I was also reflecting on this loss and memories and things like that. So, so yeah, through that, the art comes back too.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing. Is it also online? Can we see this piece of art that you created, or it's more like in a
I don't know that I've ever put it anywhere. Yeah, it's because it became very personal work
personal?
to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know that I ever put it anywhere. Maybe one day.
Okay, no, thank you for sharing this.
Sure.
And after exploring so many creative minds in your episodes, did you also notice some patterns, that common threads between artists, thinkers, and visionaries? And was there something
Yeah,
surprising, maybe?
yeah. There's a one that's recently been really kind of on my mind and propelling me toward this idea of creating a book out of it. And not to get too far into it, but basically, in the process of having, these dozens of creative geniuses laid out before me and having worked on this show for 7 years, I started to notice that there's patterns in personality traits that creative geniuses share. And that if you have roughly these seven personality traits in an exaggerated to an above average level, you start to either push yourself more toward, a creative achievement, or just for whatever reason, it causes you to maybe have more of a pleasure doing creative tasks. Uh, But yeah, I have noticed that across the patterns.
Interesting. Do you also reflect on yourself that you have it as well, or something like that? Do you have like, I don't know, you also, because when you, I guess when, as you mentioned, yes, that when you prepare these episodes, you kind of talk to them or something. Maybe do you notice something that you reflect? Oh, I also have this feature or something. Is this
Yeah,
something?
yeah, that's part of it. In the process of doing this kind of work, I am also investigating myself, and recognizing these patterns in me. And sometimes they're not always a positive thing, and it's important to recognize, like in the context of somebody like Vincent Van Gogh, who lived the life in the latter half of his life as this classic trope of a tortured, starving artist.
Yeah.
And the question you then ask is, was he embracing that? Was this like, in some part of his being, was he like, this is the way to do it? This is the only way. Like, this is kind of this traditional trope in blues music, the idea that um, your blues can only come from, like a tortured life, or from, ups and downs in your relationships, and that's where you get the blues. But that's not the case, for professional musicians. You can still be an amazing musician without living a tortured life. But I think these tropes, and occasionally their archetypes, can take hold of a person. And when you recognize that, sometimes you recognize that in yourself. This idea of, I think I recognized it in me through, all these episodes of, like, um, feeling like you're the hero that needs to
Save the world. Yeah.
save the world and embody the the great archetype of a creative genius and all this stuff. And if you're not careful, and you kind of embrace that, you can become something like Salvador Dali, where, initially you think like he's this great, brilliant figure, but for the second half of his life, he was kind of intolerable as a painful person to be around, because he was such a narcissist, and he became a caricature of himself. and his family ostracized him, or he ostracized himself from his family by the end. And he just lived like a lonely, sad remaining years of his life in his palace of wealth. And so these narratives that they're playing out um, in these characters, and they can be in you too, you know?
Yeah. Also something, yeah, you can become very delusional, for instance, as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
and can lose touch with reality, right? So it's also,
right.
you've covered in one of the interviews, because so this idea of order and chaos, and if you explore it, actually, as you also explore it, as Jung, for instance, Carl Jung, yeah, he was exploring this part a lot, also his inner self, and there was probably like also a lot of chaos in a sense. And then when we explore this part, it's it's really, I think, hard sometimes to come back to the order, or yeah, like without destabilizing yourself and your life. Actually, I
Mm-hmm.
find myself, when I kind of explore it a little bit and go too deep, I see
Mm.
that for me it's really hard. Actually, I don't know, like, did you experience ever this, that that for you, when you go a lot into maybe exploring yourself inner, like inner self, or like creativity part or something, then it's also like maybe destabilizing you, or not at all? Do you see this, or maybe not at all?
I'd like to know a little more of what you mean, but there was a one last point I wanted to make about the thing we were just talking about before I lose it. There's instances that I see, like in a figure like a Kurt Cobain or an Alexander McQueen, the fashion icon, where, you know, coming to know their personality close enough after a period of time, you see in them the role of a tragic hero playing out, a tragic
Mm-hmm.
figure. And it's something that I think they recognize in themselves, and they live it, and they don't shy away from it because they probably feel that it gives them a certain sense of an identity. Now, the trouble starts to happen when you've started to live this role and you don't question whether this is the best thing for you to identify with, because it leads to your eventual self-destruction, whether that means through drug abuse and eventual suicide, or, you know, the various afflictions that come with uh, self-loathing and putting yourself in situations where you come to harm and you harm others. And so there's something there that I think needs to be acknowledged, because that's a moment for someone to seek therapy, and a moment for somebody to acknowledge that I have something in me and I don't quite understand why it's there. And if I don't get a handle on it, this is going to end in tragedy, no matter how good my life is going. And so you recognize that in these figures sometimes, and I think that's an important thing to say, that you can, if you play a narrative out to its end, it doesn't necessarily have a happy ending.
Yeah. I also appreciate that when you cover these topics, yeah, of suicide, or like self-harm, and that you mentioned that, yeah, you need to seek help. Basically, it's I
Yeah,
think it's really really important, because yeah, as you mentioned, um, especially, yeah, I think they just didn't realize it, that they need help, and it was not available maybe to someone like Vincent Van Gogh. Well, the help was there, but again, it was not as developed at that moment, obviously, as now.
yeah, yeah.
So maybe if he would be in our times, then it wouldn't be so tragic as well.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Sorry to derail what you were saying. It was on
No,
my
no, no,
mind.
no, no.
I just want
Thank
to
you
bring it up.
for, yeah. So then maybe go into a little bit positive side of it. Do you have any advice for people who are trying to express themselves through different media? I don't know, can it be like, yeah, just start exploring, or you notice, you say that, yeah, when you deviate towards something. So any advice that you can give for people who maybe are not thinking as creative about themselves, but maybe want to try and feel the urge?
Yeah, I mean, only positive things can come from it. Trying to, you know, pick up a paintbrush, trying to take a sculpture class, trying to see if, you know, you could pick up some guitar skills. there's there's nothing negative, nothing, that's gonna affect your life, except for being challenged a little bit, right? Except for maybe occasionally realizing this is not for me. Let me try something else. But the tremendous life-affirming positivity that can come from finding a craft that, like, you connect with is really an amazing, amazing thing. And the bizarre thing is that these potential crafts that we can pursue, as mediums we can do work in, they often just hide as a potential in us without letting themselves be known and completely outside of our awareness. So, one of our close friends, after her husband passed away, and this was one of my close friends I mentioned before, in the years that followed, she ended up really kind of diving into pottery and working with her hands and forming things out of clay. And she had never really done that so much before. She maybe dabbled in it. But something happened where now she had this opportunity. She had more time on her hands and whatnot. And it kind of awoke this very life-affirming aspect that I think without it, her life would be less. She wouldn't feel the kind of gratification that doing something like that provides you. And that's to say that, I think we all have these potentials in us. All it takes is just exploring a little bit to find which one, is going to be the one that gives you so much value and meaning.
And maybe be not as judgmental as we are, because when we are already adults, I think we tend to judge ourselves too fast.
Yeah, it's true.
And just
Some things are hard, but it's worth it. Like playing the violin. Like, how many people have tried to pick up the violin and in the first month give up because you sound horrible the first month. That first month of playing is just screeching. And anybody who's a child and they thought it was a great idea to get them to take violin lessons will know this. It's like, but what happens after a few months? You get a sense for the control of the thing, and you're learning something about your body and how to use the instrument. So yeah, you're right. Don't be so hard on yourself. Sometimes it takes a little patience. Um, try to find the thing that you seem predisposed towards doing, like whether it's working with your hands, whether it's moving your body, whether it's using your voice, singing, speaking, um, right, or reading poetry, or there's so many things to pursue.
Yeah, notice it. Thank
Yeah,
you for sharing. I
thank
know we
you.
already need to finish, but I still have few questions to maybe, I hope we can still cover. So looking back to your whole life and creative process, you've worked on a podcast, in your creative decisions, would you do anything differently, and what? You can take just podcast, for instance, but you can take maybe your whole life journey, let's say, as a creative.
Wow. Would I do anything differently as a creative? Whew. I
Or
don't
maybe
know.
with, yeah, or maybe with the podcast, you would say, like, right now, when you already have this 6 years of experience, you would say, maybe from the beginning, I would do that. I don't know.
Right. I mean, from a practical standpoint regarding the podcast, I feel that I maybe should have hopped onto YouTube sooner. I've started to have more of a YouTube presence now with Creative Codex, and I can see um, that it's a very powerful platform if you get into the good graces of the algorithm. Just from just a purely practical standpoint, nothing to do with, the my soul or creativity and whatever, but just from the practical sense, because there's something about the medium of video that obviously engages more of an audience. And right now, and probably for the near future on YouTube, there's this, there seems to be a leaning more toward long form content. And people enjoy it, and people like, turning something on for an hour, and whether they're just listening or just watching it. And curiously enough, I think the platform and the way they've made their algorithm, it supports that more, because if they're more interested in money, they realize that if somebody is willing to sit through an hour of something, we can push that many more ads at them. So let's get that content that's, over 45 minutes, that's an hour. Let's get that a
Mhm.
little bit more into everybody's eyeballs, because if it proves that it's quality enough for somebody to sit through for an hour, then you know, then it's worthwhile in that regard. So I think getting on YouTube sooner probably would have been positive.
Thank you for sharing. And talking about algorithms and I think we would be remiss if we wouldn't talk about AI at the moment. So, what do you think about AI and what role it plays in art and creative process?
Yeah, yeah. Another topic, I could spend an entire episode about.
Yeah, of course.
I have definitely some thoughts and reflections on it. I myself have used a program called Midjourney to explore image generation, and we could get into the weeds again. It's a topic for another time, whether that's art or not. And but overall, though, I have many complaints regarding obviously the use of existing art by very well accomplished, talented, and often independent and also starving artists that these models have been trained on with no regard for compensation or copyright or credit given to anyone. And that's a very strange moral area that I feel we need to be wrestling with and addressing. And we need to be giving the option for artists to opt out if they want
Yeah.
from these models. Because I've used these models out of experiments of my own, and you can tell it to create artwork in the style of so and so, who is a living artist, who has work online, and the model will create it for you. And it's just kind of morally, it's not only ambiguous, I think it's just wrong. So there's that aspect of it. But then the other flip side of it is the genie is out of the bag. We can figure out all that economic and moral stuff as we go. But what we have right now on our hands is a very interesting and compelling kind of tool, especially for commercial work. And I feel that anybody who's active as some kind of creator in a field that has commercial work, you're going to need to know how to use AI in your field because it'll streamline things for you. It'll make it so that your process is faster. Um, it'll make it so that you can mock things up much quicker for, your boss or producer, whoever you're working with, and give them examples. And at the end of the day, that's, what people want. They want to be able to do things quicker and more streamlined, and they'll pay you for it. So it's complicated.
Okay. And then following this question again, another hard question, I guess it would be what is the future of art and creativity, in your opinion?
Eugenia, you're bringing it today. Came locked and loaded. The future of art and creativity. I would say that if uh, if we come to an unfortunate point in human history where, we're in nuclear fallout and all of technology has disappeared and the cities have gone and people, are dispersed into small bands of tribes, we're going to return to what we've always had from the beginning, which is some form of creating and making art and making sounds that become music and connecting with each other through that. That has been the one steady thread that we can trace back to the earliest examples of humanity existing. And the fact that the earliest example of humanity existing we have are artworks that humans made on caves and flutes they made from bones is indicative of this idea that art and creativity is at the core of who we are, and that's kind of a profound thing to reflect upon and to embrace. You could say it's probably a defining feature of humans. So it's going to keep going whether we do anything about it or not. It's about, so my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. As a last note, maybe, do you have any recommendations for people who never listen to your podcast? I have my personal recommendations, but maybe with which episode you would suggest to start? You have so many
Sure.
of them. You also have something behind the paywall in Patreon, which I always also like to recommend
Thank
people,
you.
but your personal favorite maybe at the moment.
Yeah. I would say, for a general audience pick, it would be the Vincent Van Gogh series. That's somewhere in the 20s in terms of episode numbers,
23, 20, yeah, something like that. Yeah,
something
it's
like this.
beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. I think it hits upon, very emotionally captivating material. I think inspiring material, just from Vincent's letters themselves. And then, of course, also it's very much a deep dive into his artworks. And so I think it's very easy entrance into the show because Vincent continues to be a very evocative character. People go to like the Vincent Van Gogh experience kind of exhibitions and these kinds of things. And films continue to be made about him. So it's a really nice way to enter what we do on the show. And then the other one, in terms of psychology, if people are interested in that route, would be the Carl Jung's Red Book episodes. I believe those are episodes 11 and 12. Those are very much a deep dive into Carl Jung, who I believe was a creative genius also. He just happened to be working in the field of psychology. So those two would be good avenues.
Yeah, if I can also add, again, my 2 cents, I definitely agree with these ones, but I also appreciate that you actually also give a space for women as well. Like, for instance, I would never, honestly, I would never heard about Leonor Fini, I think, for instance. It was just also very interesting life story. And other people that you covered also, and give them space. I'm also looking forward to Hilde von Klimt. So again, I was surprised because you have people there who are, let's say, obvious picks, but some of them, I just also want to thank you as a listener that that you brought these stories. I think it's very
Yeah,
important. Thank you.
I appreciate the acknowledgement of that. I mean, at the end of the day, they're also tremendous stories, and they also created tremendous works of art. So it's worthwhile exploring anyone and everyone. It doesn't really matter, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Do you have any final notes to our listeners? Anything that you want to add? Maybe we will put definitely in the show notes, your podcast and your website, but anything that you want to still say, maybe.
No, just thank you again for this opportunity, and perhaps ending on that idea of everyone who's listening to be open to exploring their hidden potentials a little bit, just poking around in there, seeing what they find.
Yes, and you inspire us. Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Creativity series on Psychology Inside Out podcast. We hope you are inspired to keep exploring your own creative side in whatever form it takes. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and share the show to help us keep growing our creative community. Until next time, and keep creating.